Hey everybody, my name's Kurt Conrad and welcome to West Fourth and Goal, a podcast for high school sports fans in North Central Ohio. Those of you who subscribe to the podcast may have noticed we took a sabbatical last week. That's only partially true. We had some technical difficulties with the audio file, but we think we have everything ironed out now. If you don't subscribe to the podcast, by all means, do so. You can find West Fourth and Goal at just about any place where you download podcasts, I guess. The good news is our guest from last week's scheduled episode agreed to come back to the studio this week. But before we introduce him, we have some other business to get to first. I'm here with co-host Effie James. And Effie, since we talked last time, your documentary, TY for Tigers, A Story of Life, Community, and Basketball, debuted. And while I haven't attended a lot of premieres, that one seemed to be pretty successful.
It was. It seemed to be, after I've watched it a few times, and when you're in the editing phase, you kind of see it over and over again, so you kind of get used to all the stuff. So seeing other people see it was really interesting, and I think we've had great feedback, and I'm really just overwhelmed at the positive feedback we got from everybody who's seen it.
My family and I went to the premiere, and what we were talking afterwards. What was really neat is you see the guys up there on the screen, and then you look right beside you, and they're sitting there beside you. I guess it kind of adds to the intimacy of it. I mean, it's a very personal project.
Yeah, it was one of those things I wanted really bad for all the guys that were involved in it, all the people that were involved in it, to be at the premiere so people can see them and talk to them and to be honest, them see each other. A lot of the players that were there hadn't seen each other in years, and it was great to see them come back as a quasi reunion for them, and even some of the coaches and some of the people that were around back then. It was a great evening, and I'm glad that we were able to put together a project that really made people feel good and made me feel good as well.
And those are some of the all-time greats that senior high has produced. I mean,
Yeah.
Ahmed Kent's the career leader and he's fourth on the scoring list or
Right.
third maybe, and Bubba Totti is who I was getting to.
Right.
He leads seniors. He's on seniors all-time list as the
Yeah.
assist leader and the steals leader.
Yes.
And that got us to thinking, and we talked a little bit about this before, but we've debated a little bit about the Mount Rushmore of
Yeah.
Mansfield senior basketball, and
Right.
I think there's a pretty compelling argument that can be made for both those guys.
It is. It depends on what you want, and you could talk pure basketball. You could talk about what an individual meant to a team.
Right.
That thing can go a thousand different ways, and believe me, my friends and I have went hours and hours debating who should go on a Mount Rushmore, who's the best guard, who's the best big man. We divide it up and chop it up as many ways as we can, and we always end up arguing about it, so
Right.
I always just quit.
I think we can agree Dupreece Owens probably deserves a spot up there, right? Though
I would think so.
He's the school's career leader in scoring and rebounding. He had a great career at Nebraska and played professionally for a long time, I think. Who else goes up there?
Well,
think?
it's hard to to leave off, and I try not to be so recent focused, but it's hard to leave. Like the head coach and the current head coach now, Marquis Sykes,
Right.
who was an all-time great. The kid who he scored over 1,000, but I'm telling you right now, he could have scored a lot more.
Right.
He had that type of capability, but he was such a team guy. He done what we needed to do to win. If he needed 30, if we needed him to get 30 to win, he got us 30. If we needed him to get other people involved, he was able to do that. And that team also had Rick Menard, a pro, coming off the bench. So he was a great leader. He has to go up there. And then, like we were talking earlier about people talking about the vintage Tigers.
Right.
I mentioned Ken Mcauley, who played in the 1940s, I believe. And Ken Mcauley revolutionized the position of guard.
Right.
Because when you were 6 foot or above, you automatically went in the post in those days. Well, he was one of the first guards that was 6 foot or above, and he became such he was a matchup nightmare, according to him. He was telling me these stories. And, so little guys couldn't guard him, and big guys were too slow for him. So he revolutionized, the game at that time. And he, again, is one of the few 1,000-point scorers we have.
If I'm not mistaken, I mean, it was a time before Mr. Basketball was presented, but he won the precursor to that award
Right.
2 years in a row.
Yeah.
So he was evidently doing something right.
Absolutely. He was a great player.
I've covered senior high pretty consistently since 2000. I've had the opportunity to cover a lot of great players just in that short period of time, but I think for my money, no one has gotten more out of less, and that's certainly not to take anything away from. But John Avery was a 6'5" post player who was really skinny. He probably weighed less than I do now, and boy, he got his miles worth out of that body.
He did. He was one of those guys, man. His athleticism was off the charts, but he has such a great feel for the game, and one of the skills that he has that not many people really look at is great hand. And when you look at the reason why he scored so many points and got so many loose balls, he had great hands, and if the ball hits his hands, he's got it. And if you're not really a student of basketball, you don't realize how important that is. Right. And you watch how many kids, and even in college or pros, the ball's bobbled so much, and it is a skill to have great hands, and he had that. Just a great all-around player. He's another guy that done whatever we needed him to do for us to get the wins.
And I think he was a career 70% field goal, not free throw, field goal shooter.
Field goal shooter.
He made 7 out of every 10 shots he took from the field.
Absolutely. And he developed, I remember as a freshman, he only took layups. You never catch him taking a bad shot. And then he developed, and by his senior year, he had a pretty good 10 to 12-foot jump shot, and he would take it when he was open. So, I can't disagree, but we could go on and on about all those guys.
I tell you why I think he belongs up there, because his senior year in the district finals, senior high beat Lima Senior, and they had Travis Walton, who went to Michigan State. And then in the regional semifinals, senior high beat Del Von Rowe, and he went to Michigan State, I believe.
Right.
And then in the regional championship game, there was a kid named Dallas Lauderdale
from Solon,
who had a pretty good career at Ohio State. And then in the state semifinals, even, I think he outplayed Raymar Morgan down there.
Yeah, he played very well.
Raymar had a real good career at Michigan State as well.
He did. He played well. He's definitely one of my favorite players, absolutely. And I would always tell him when he was a freshman playing, I told him, I said, listen, you listen to me and you'll be playing basketball on TV in college. And he would always – he'd always laugh at me. He's like, "Oh, coach, man, you don't mean that." I said, "I'm telling you, you got the skill." And sure enough, he ends up at IUPUI, and I end up taking one of our teams down to watch him play a college game, and that was a memorable moment for the guys on that team that year.
And I think he still holds the record for field goal percentage
at
IUPUI. I dropped a little bit. I think he's right around 63, 64% there. So, I mean, to do that at the Division I level it's ridiculous.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're right. We could probably spend the entire episode talking about this, but before we go down that rabbit hole, I think we should try to at least welcome in this week's guest. He's one of the area's most versatile athletes, and if there is a Mount Rushmore of Mansfield senior football, he might very well one day find himself on it. It's my great pleasure to welcome Junior Angelo Gross to the IdeaWorks podcast studio. And Angelo, welcome back to the show. We had you down here last week. Things didn't work out, but thanks for coming back down.
You're welcome.
I think it's not a stretch, I guess, to say that the Gross family is the first family of football here in Mansfield.
Yeah, I wouldn't call that a stretch at all. When you have that many, and it always seems like year after year, they have talented young boys and girls who contribute to Tiger Athletics, and it's a great thing to have. And I think Coach Tyree Shine, the track coach, said something. I think he may have been quoted in the paper. He said, "If you got a Gross, you got a chance."
Right.
And that is absolutely true. And I wanted to ask Angelo, what does it feel like, man, to be, you're a Gross, your last name is Gross, you're an athlete, you play for senior high. What does that mean to you? Do you feel any responsibility to be good or to be great? How does that feel to be with your name?
Yeah, I definitely feel like I got to be good, and because every time people speak of the Grosses, they speak highly, so I feel like I got to let them say the same thing about me.
Your dad was obviously a real good player, Ali Gross, we're talking about, who played with you in the mid-'90s, started his career at Youngstown State under Jim Tresswell, I believe, finished up over here at Ashland University. I would imagine getting advice from Dad is a little different, knowing that he did what he did. What's that whole dynamic like between you and I? I know Ali coaches defensive backs at Mansfield Senior, but what's that dynamic like? Is it strictly coach and player at while you're at school, and then dad and son at home, or how's that work?
It's like it's always like he's always trying to give me great pointers, and it's just it's always great to have him around because he's done the same thing I've done. He played the same position, and it just makes it easier.
I would imagine when you're getting advice from a senior high grade, it probably sticks a little bit more, huh?
Yeah, and I think, Ali gives, has to be able to give him great advice on what it means. One of the things that I find so interesting is, I've had the opportunity to go to some other high schools, especially in bigger cities, and the inner city school teams. You'll go to an inner city game, and you might see 200 people at the game. You know what I mean? And high school sports just is not what it is. So playing basketball or football in this community is special. And the thing is, a lot of the kids that play here will not play basketball, gym, or a football arena like they will here. And that's why I think it's so important. And I think that Ali being able to transfer that to his son is huge because, it's a big stage when you're playing for Mansfield Senior at Arlen Field.
Absolutely.
And not everybody can do it.
Angelo, I would imagine Dad does he talk about the glory days at all? Does he tell you about his playing days?
Yeah, he always tells me about how he was good and no one caught a pass on him.
If you had a pretty good look at that, is that the truth? I mean, was he kind of a shutdown guy?
Well, he was, and he was a physical. And like I said, the game has changed a lot. It's not as, even in high school, it's so wide open now. I can't remember seeing as many teams pass the way they do. But back then, it wasn't as wide open. To play corner, you had to be a football player. You just can't say, well, I'm just going to guard my guy. And you had to be a football player to play corner. And Ali was a complete football player. He could guard. He could play man-to-man defense or whatever. But he also, when it would come time for him to be at the point of attack, he'd come up and make the hit. So, he was a really talented player, but he was a Gross, so we expected that.
Does Dad treat you like the other guys, or does he maybe expect a little bit more from you?
Yeah. When it comes to like a team thing, yeah, he treats me like everybody else. But when it's one-on-one, it's it's real tough.
Do you leave it at Arlen Field or at the end of the day, or do you come home and talk about football around the dinner table?
Yeah, sometimes we leave it there, and then sometimes we talk about it.
Well, could you guard him, do you think? Could you shut him down?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Now, your dad is one of 18 brothers and sisters, and we, talked about it in the past. I mean, I would imagine, going to the family reunion, does it get pretty competitive amongst everyone? I mean, what's that whole dynamic like?
Yeah, it's always competitive, from basketball games and to football, softball, kickball, everything.
Doesn't matter what they're doing, huh?
Yeah.
How many people come to a Gross family reunion?
A whole lot.
There were 6 Grosses on the roster this past fall. One of them is your younger brother. The other guys, I think, are cousins. It's got to be pretty special to just not only be playing at Arlen Field on Friday nights, but to be doing it with so many of your family members. Is it pretty special?
Yeah, it's pretty special. Just being there with them, it's like a memory that you're always going to remember, and it's just always fun.
Yeah, and your cousin Alamar just signed a national letter of intent. He's one of the very few people who got a full ride to Ashland University. It's got to be really special to see good things happening for him, huh?
Yeah, it's really nice to see that.
What do you think he does well, and what's he going to need to work on, do you think?
He's really, really good at just reading the offense and work on. I don't think he really got a lot to work on.
Right?
Probably his size.
That's what I've been told. Is he's going to need to put on some weight. I mean, playing at the Division II level there's an awful lot of good players at that level.
Well, I think that that's the one thing that you never have to worry about. And I've always, when I talk to college scouts, they project out the young men, and because they don't take strength into account. They really look at their skill, their competitiveness, and and obviously, can they compete on that high level, and are they going to be able to step up in the big stage? One thing that they don't worry about is strength. If you've got the ability, you've got the competitiveness, you are going to get stronger in college because it is a requirement.
Yeah,
it's a job. It's part of your job is to get stronger.
Once they get their hands on you and get you in the nutrition program, and that's as important as anything, I think, is just eating right over there.
It is a requirement, and that's why one of the things that I loved about playing Division I football was it kind of took everything out of your hands, and they, you eat together, you have training table, they monitor what you eat, your day goes classes in the morning, practice in the afternoon, training table, study table, then bed.
Right.
And that's it. That's life.
Lights out, and then it's time to get up and do it again the next day. Huh?
Exactly.
Now, Angelo, you played quarterback for the first 5 games in the fall. Now, had you had any experience playing quarterback in the past?
Like when we played younger with the Power League, that's about it.
I would imagine if it's got to be a little different after taking 5 years off or whatever.
Yeah, and I'm sure that was tough. And I came in and I worked with the quarterbacks a couple days while they were in camp, and I was just amazed at how he just naturally threw the football and had great velocity on it. And I'm thinking to myself, man, there's no way a lot of kids could have that natural ability to throw a football. It just doesn't come natural to a lot of kids. So he done a great job even in those first 5 games, and you could say, well, he was a running quarterback, but he wasn't.
Right.
Angelo completed some big passes for them. So it was I'm sure it was tough for him to transfer into being a quarterback. And my only concern was him being a quarterback for 5 games and then the team having to try to transfer to a new quarterback, because that sometimes takes time.
I would imagine you're used to looking at the game from the receiver's point of view. When you're the quarterback and you kind of got to know everything is what's going on out there. I mean, is your head kind of spinning the first time you lined up under center? Or did you handle it pretty well?
Yeah, at first it was, and then the first snap, and then I was like, all right. After the second snap, I was like, okay, I got it now.
Yeah, I would imagine once you get that first hit, it's all back to normal.
Yeah, it is. It's still football. How'd you feel, when it come game time and you were the quarterback and you're calling the plays, and did you ever feel like I got to make this throw, or did you feel like, I need to make a play with my legs? How did that go in your head? When did you decide I'm going to be a runner or I'm going to be a passer? How did that go for you?
Really, it was tough because I'm short, so I couldn't really see over the line.
Right.
So it was more like, if I see you, I'm gonna throw it. If I can't,
I love that.
I'll run.
Perfect.
F, is that how you approached it?
I was probably less than that. It was like, if I can run, I'm gone.
Right.
And if I happen to see you on my way out, I'll hit you.
Now, you started 5 games at quarterback, and then Cam Todd, who transferred over from Ontario, took over at quarterback. I think you were the team's leading receiver despite playing quarterback for 5 games. You were the second leading rusher. That's just on offense. And defensively, I think you tied for the team lead with 3 interceptions, second leading tackler, and then take into account all the things you did on special teams. I don't know, did he drive the bus to away games?
Maybe.
Yeah. Nonetheless, I mean, do you like all the work, or is there a time when you're thinking, man, I could use a play off here now and every once in a while?
I definitely love the work. It's always fun.
What do you think you do better? I mean, do you like the offensive load better, or do you like playing defense better?
I like playing defense better.
Why is that?
I like hitting people. Yeah, it's fun. And then it's like, it's better when you make big plays, because on offense you expect big plays, but on defense you really got to work for them.
Now, you came in as a freshman and you were a starter. You played that first year with the guy Brian Benson, who's the career rushing leader at Mansfield Senior. He's having a great career at Findlay, and you played 2 years with Jornell Manns, a Division I guy. Are there things you learn from guys like that? I mean, what'd you learn from watching those guys?
From Toledo, I definitely took his hard work, and I tried to use that into my game. And Jornell, he's so shifty with the ball. I try to use that too.
And he redshirted at Minnesota this past year, and from what I understand, he may miss the spring, but I would imagine he's going to eventually work his way onto the field. I would imagine it's got to be not only exciting to see a guy that you played with, but kind of eye-opening, thinking, I can do that too, right?
Yeah, definitely. I always look up to him, and like, he did it. He always tells me, like, you're next. I'm like, all right.
And F, is there a time, I mean, every young athlete dreams of playing at that next level. Is there a time when the light switch goes on, you think, well, it's not necessarily a dream now, it's something that's achievable?
Well, I think, you get to a certain age, and I'm telling you what, the way things are now, it's so different.
Right.
And I think Jokey would say the same thing. When we were in school, we got to be seniors, and then we start thinking like, wow, I could go to college to play football. Right. Nowadays kids are thinking about that a lot earlier, and they're exposed to a lot more things. And so the concept and the thought of going to college and being successful and playing is something that they can look forward to earlier, which means they work harder earlier. And and I really think that's something that Angelo has done, and he's got a lot of eyes on him. And the thing that I liked about him is he performed. And sometimes you could have all the ability in the world, but I've seen a lot of kids, when the lights come on, especially at Arlen Field or even Pete Henry Gym, the lights come on and they dim.
Right.
They shy away from that moment. And that's the difference between playing major D1 and not playing at all and just being a high school athlete.
It's funny you say that. I remember you telling me a story, and I'm not going to name names because I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus.
I appreciate that.
But it's when you were the basketball coach and there was a freshman, and you told him, I'd like you to come up and, play. And he said, no thanks, basically, right?
Right.
And that's a little unusual for me.
You get, and you'll get that because the idea is, sometimes you're not ready for the moment, or the moment is too big. And I think a lot of people look at young men, and because you're good at something, they feel like your heart is in it. And that's not always the case.
Right.
And I told people, when I was doing research for this documentary, and they were saying, how much football I ended up going to college for football, but my heart I was a basketball player at heart. So even though football was fun and I liked doing it and I was, good at it, my heart wasn't in it.
Right.
And so when you go to college, and I went to college and my heart wasn't fully into playing football, those things will get exposed. And I see that now when I watch kids play. I always encourage them by saying, listen, put your heart into what if you love it, give it all you got, because, you never know where this thing could take you. It may take you, maybe to the pros, but better yet, this could be a way to a better life.
Sure. Through
education and a lot of other avenues.
Angelo, you came in as a freshman and you were on that varsity field right away. I mean, was there ever a time where the lights were maybe too bright, or did you feel like you deserved to be out there from day one?
Definitely the big walnut game. Definitely the first play, it was like, oh, man.
And that was, if memory serves, was it at Big Walnut?
Yeah, it was.
That's what I thought. And I remember because Trayshawn Wyndham, I think, had a couple interceptions, and Chioke was raving about this. And Trayshawn Wyndham's a guy who, as a senior this year, probably will end up playing football someplace. Chioke Bradley was just raving about the secondary, and I'm thinking, man, that's freshmen and sophomores, and he was absolutely right.
Yeah, those guys really, they played well from the beginning, and that's the thing about Chioke and his staff, man. They do a great job developing these guys and then giving them the opportunity. And, I never feel like when I'm watching these guys play that the moment's too big for them. They come in, they got great confidence, and Chioke being a DB, I'm sure has a lot to do with that. And they play hard and they play tough. And it's a tribute to his staff and his program.
I think a point that needs to be made too here is the kind of the rise of the summer football camps. Yeah. And it is to high school football what AAU is to high school basketball, I think. Right. And that exposure that these guys are getting at a younger age is, all of a sudden when the lights come on Friday nights, it's not too bright for them anymore.
Absolutely. And I was going to ask Angelo, what do you think about 7-on-7 and being in, football but kind of not football? What do you think about the concept of playing that way in the off season?
For offense, I love it.
Yeah.
But then when it goes to defense,
it's unfair. Ain't it?
Yeah, it's not fair.
Now, you're a guy who's gone to a lot of those camps. You've been invited to some pretty high-level camps. A lot of people are interested in you. What's that experience like, especially for someone who's still so young? I mean, when you're going up against guys who are, those 4-star or 5-star recruits or whatever, is it kind of, I don't know, eye-opening that you can compete with those guys?
Yeah, it is. And then once you run one route on them or guard them once, you're like, well, what kind of stars do you got?
Yeah, right. Right on. What kind of stars do you have? Are you ranked out there? I don't even know.
No, I don't think I'm ranked.
Well, that seems like an oversight.
Right, you will be.
You are a member of a really talented junior class. Blake Caudell is a guy who's got several Division I offers. You and Anthony Hawkins are both D1 recruits, and yet you guys were 5-5 last year. Now, all 5 of those losses were against playoff teams. There's no shame in that. But how do you look at your junior season? I mean, were you disappointed with it, or were there lessons that you guys learned that maybe you can take into your senior year?
Yeah, it's definitely always lessons that you can learn and things that you could change, and we got to make those changes.
What would you change about last year?
What would I change?
If anything at all, or is it all part of the experience?
Yeah, I think it's most of the experience stuff because, we switched quarterbacks and some people got hurt on the defense and offense. So it really was just adjusting the things.
And I would imagine that all that stuff, it's all kind of a precursor to this year, right?
Yeah, and see, when I look at that season, I look at it as, I remember, when I coached Understand, we had a 2-8 year, and I think Jeremy Butts was our quarterback, and we went 2-8. And, man, but every game we were in, we lost 6 or 7 games by 5 points or less. I mean, it was we just had – but all those guys, we had a junior, oriented class.
Right.
And that next year, we go 8-2, make the playoffs. We beat Mansfield for the first time in years. And, it was just a precursor to that next year. And all those kids remembered those tight games that we lost. And they came back. They worked tremendously hard in the offseason, and they were prepared. And so, when I look at this season, I look at it like, look, we lost to some quality teams, but also it's going to prepare these young guys. They are going to be more than prepared for the next season, and I expect great success for these guys next year.
And I think you would know better than me, but winning it's kind of a process. You got to learn how to win, and you got to learn how to win those close games.
It's more than that, Kurt. It's a culture, man. Winning is a culture, and even though the football team is 5-5, Coach Bradley has developed a winning culture amongst those kids. Go out every game, no matter who we're playing, expecting to win, and that. Every program doesn't say that. Winning is a culture that he is, kind of bred into this program, and these kids expect to win, and that is hard to do. But I think that's what they got now at senior high.
And I've talked to Chioke about it. I mean, maybe I was a middling basketball player at best, and maybe I was a dumb basketball player at the time, but there was never a game that I didn't expect to win, and when we lost, I was genuinely surprised and brokenhearted. It's not always like that nowadays. No. It doesn't seem like. It seems like kids, I don't know what it is, but it seems like they don't expect to win maybe every time out, which is unusual to me.
And sometimes I think that, and Angelo can speak to this, because, when you come into a game, no matter who you're playing, when you see the outcome, do you always expect to win? Do you feel like, if we do this well, we can win? How do you feel coming into a game against an opponent?
Always confident when going into a game, and I always expect to win. And then when that's not the case, it is always heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's absolutely. I was absolutely brokenhearted every time we lost, and we lost a bunch when I was a senior. But it was a surprise to me every time. Yeah. Now, before we get into talking basketball here, I think we ought to spend a few minutes talking about what happened last spring for you down at the state track meet. You were a 23-foot long jumper. That hadn't happened around here in a long time. I think you finished 6th at state, and all but one of those kids who finished in front of you has since graduated. Is there a long jump state championship coming back to Mansfield sometime in the foreseeable future?
Yes, definitely.
Just talk a little bit about that. I mean, I think you won your first junior Olympic gold medal when you were, 12 years old or something like that?
Yeah.
I mean, this is something you've been doing for a long time. Is track your first love?
That in football is real close.
Yeah.
And long jump, it was I just did it so well and so naturally. And then I actually started working on it real hard, and then I got the results.
23 feet as a sophomore, is that something you even think about yet? Or, I mean, is that something you've even wrapped your head around? That's out there, and, I mean, there's not a whole lot of kids in the state that are doing that.
Yeah, I know I haven't wrapped my head around it yet.
I don't blame you. I wouldn't think too much on it either. Bubba Toddy owns the school record. I think it's almost 25 feet. Is that a realistic goal for you, do you think?
Yeah.
How do you squeeze two more feet out of? I mean, it's hard for me to wrap my head around.
Well, I know the track coach at the time, one of the track coaches, Khalil Ali, who coached Bubba Toddy, he said the natural ability is one thing, but when you get down to the nuances of a few inches or even a foot, technique comes in. You get to some point where all the kids can jump a long way, but when you want to get to those last few inches or things like that, it's about your technique. And when I watched him coach those young guys on long jump, he would be so particular on how close you get, hitting the board exactly right, and how you land and your balance, your control in the air. And I'm thinking to myself, I never knew long jump was such a technical thing, but you would know it is a very technical sport.
And at that level, at the state level, I mean, where every inch matters. I mean, I would imagine how important is technique once you get down there?
Technique is very important, and if your technique is not all the way there, things can go real bad.
I would imagine you get exposed pretty quickly down at Jesse Owens Memorial Stadium if things aren't going well. Now, I also saw you've added the. I don't know how long you've been doing it, but I saw a video on Twitter of you high jumping, and you cleared, 6'6"?
Yep.
Is that something you're going to add to the arsenal this spring, or did you do it much last year at all?
Yeah, I did it in every meet last year, but that was the first time.
Joe Ellis won a state championship a few years ago at 6'10", a Mansfield senior guy. Is that something that's on the horizon? Could you imagine getting there?
Yeah, that too.
Last year, you got to go to the state track meet with your sister, Leia. She competed in Division II. Senior high girls were D2, boys were D1 for enrollment. purposes, I guess. But and she placed real high in the hurdles. What was that experience like? Not only going to Columbus as a sophomore, but going there with your older sister. It had to be pretty special.
Yeah, it was great. Just getting off the bus, just us two. It was just cool, I guess. And I always like seeing her, watching her compete. I love watching her compete.
I guess if your last name's Gross, you shouldn't be surprised that there's only two people on the bus and they're both named Gross. What was that relationship like? I mean, did you guys push each other? Did it a friendly rivalry?
Yeah, every day in practice. Her hurdle's right beside mine. And we just go at it, whole practice.
Would she beat you in the hurdles, do you think?
I'd be close.
And she's running track at Ohio University now?
Yeah.
And I think I saw a picture on some social media here recently where they had the MAC Indoor Championships, and is it her cousin or your guys' cousin who runs for Toledo?
Yep.
Who's that?
Lasia.
Okay, and again, I guess that comes with being a Gross. You're just going to run into a cousin or a brother or sister at a Division I track. You're a Division I prospect in football, obviously. Would you entertain the possibility of playing football and long jumping at the college level? I mean, is that something that you could see yourself doing, and how difficult would that be, do you think?
Yeah, I actually do want to do it, and I feel like it'd be really, really difficult, but I guess I just got to work for it.
If you were a D1 guy in one sport, and it's a job when you get there.
It's tough, and I played with a couple guys who were also at Bowling Green that ran track and played football, and to be quite honest, both coaches don't like it a whole lot, but they recognize the fact that, look, we got a special athlete here, and they deal with it. And what I wanted to ask Angelo is, like, will that play a part in your choice when it comes to colleges, whether a team is, totally for or against you playing both sports? Will that factor into what school you go to? Yeah,
that'll factor into it a little bit.
Yeah. And I know Chioke loves it he loves having track guys who play who play football and play other sports. And we've all the kids that we've run through the podcast studio this fall, a bunch of them are multi-sport athletes, and I think specialization is, we could have an entire episode talking about that, but I like guys who are well-rounded and like to compete in a lot of different things.
Well, it really should be. If it's not already, that the specialty thing should be a thing of the past, to be honest. Right. You could look at all the stats and everything. Kids who specialize just aren't as overall successful in sports, as kids that compete more and more often. And I think, it's a bonus when a kid is a great athlete and a great, and can be one of the best sprinters or high jumpers or long jumpers, along with being one of the best football players. But just competing, and I know Chioke feels this way too, having them compete. He loves having his linemen wrestle. He loves having his skill guys run track. And if you don't want to do that, play baseball. He's all about competing. So when you come back to football, that competitive fire is still in you. And that's a huge thing. And you can't really teach that. They have to do that.
Angelo, are there things that, you take away? Are there things that happen on the football field that translate to basketball? And in terms of competition, just being able to go out there and line up against someone and go at it?
Yeah, definitely. I love competition. It just makes me go harder.
Right. You were an All-Ohio football guy this past fall. I think Division III special, honorable mention, special mention. Things are going great for you. Then your family gets some pretty devastating news right before the start of the basketball season. Tell you what, let's get a word from our sponsor, and we'll come back and talk about that with Mansfield Senior's Angelo Gross. Two Cousins is the official pizza of West 4th and Goal. No matter what you're hungry for, Andy has something for you. So give Two Cousins a call at 419-522-2211 to place your order, or stop by the downtown location at 103 North Main Street. Two Cousins Pizza. It's the official pizza of West 4th and Goal. Now, Angelo, just before the break, we were talking about some news you guys got right around Thanksgiving. It was kind of when your world was turned upside down. That's when your younger brother Jaden was diagnosed with leukemia, an aggressive form of leukemia. Just kind of take us through that time, and how difficult was that for you and the family?
Well, we were on a college visit at Georgia Tech, and he kept saying his head's hurting, he don't feel good, he tired, his head hurting the whole time. Then came back home the next day, took him to the doctors, got blood work. That was the day before Thanksgiving. And then on Thanksgiving, my sister called me and said Jaden got leukemia. And we drove right up to the hospital, and we just sat there the whole time, just waiting and waiting and waiting. We were just waiting.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, your whole life kind of revolves around sports, and you're very focused on that. And a lot of us are like that when we're growing up. But I would imagine when something that big happens, that big of a life event happens, it's gotta kind of change the way you look at things a little bit, huh?
Yeah, it definitely will change the way. Like everything I do it for him now.
I would imagine also. I mean, I was a younger brother, but as an older brother, you probably always want to protect your younger siblings, and that's something. I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. That's not something you can protect him from. Is it difficult for you watching him, struggle like that? I would imagine.
Yeah, it's definitely tough because I can't do anything to help him.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I think what has been really neat is I covered the Ashland basketball game at Ashland early in the season and during the basketball season, and after the game, some younger Ashland fans who I would imagine probably played against your younger brother came over and gave you some cards and stuff like that. It's got to be pretty neat, I would imagine, to see how other communities are kind of rallying around your younger brother.
Yeah, it is. It is.
What have some of the other places done, or is it a lot of that? People giving cards and well wishes.
Yeah, it's just like well wishes and things. Is like it's just nice.
Right. And I mean, high school sports can be pretty tribal. I mean, it's you against me, but it's neat to watch communities come together when it's beyond high school sports. I guess.
And that's the competitive element, and then there's a life element too, and that's the great thing. And that's why I love high school sports, because it's the ultimate combination of both. It's life along with competitiveness, and some of the things that you see in high school sports, and one of the things I was listening to somebody about basketball talking about they should put a shot clock in high school, and I look at that and I'm thinking, well, listen, the human element is these are high school kids. They're having fun. There's a shot clock in the NBA and college because that's a business. That's the only reason. And things like this, when communities come together, high schools are about the communities and the fans coming together. And then even in tragedy, they come together, and we talk about the thing with Jalen, which is, the community is coming together. And the same thing with the young lady in Shelby. And you can see the heart of your community. And that's the best part of a really bad situation. But, the idea is to lift the family up as best we can. And I think our community has done a great job with that.
Sure. And Clear Fork's going through the same thing right now. I mean, they just lost a young man who lost his battle with brain cancer, and he's been battling it for a long time. But, I mean, he's certainly gotten a lot of support from around Richland County, and not just down in the valley.
Sure. That's just a part of it, and that's the best of, what communities have to offer. When in time of need, whether you know the person or not, when you know someone's in need of support or a word or any kind of support, that's when high school sports is at its very best, and that's why I enjoy it, and I love being around it.
Right, and everyone, I think, is affected by cancer in some way or the other. It's a dirty, filthy disease, and hopefully at some point they're going to figure out a way to correct it. But your story kind of has, as Angelo has a happy ending. Your brother is cancer-free, is that correct?
Yeah, he's cancer-free.
Well, that is great news, and if he's listening to us out there, we certainly wish him the best of luck.
Absolutely.
Let's finally. I mean, we're half hour in. We might as well talk a little bit about basketball season since it's a basketball podcast. The Tigers are 14-4, just coming off a loss to a very good Lima Senior team, a state-ranked Lima Senior team. Just take us through that game this past weekend. You guys were right with them for the first half. They kind of pulled away from you in the second half. What went wrong for you there in the second half?
We started off well, like you said, and then came out third quarter and just fell apart. I think most of us just lost focus. That's a big thing. Just lost focus.
And it ended up being like a 15-point game. You guys got a really big one coming up this weekend. You can't feel too sorry for yourselves for long. You guys play Lexington at Pete Henry Gym on Friday night. Lexington leads the conference by a game. They beat you at their place. You guys are one game back. In a lot of ways, this is the de facto conference championship game. I mean, are you trying to approach this one like every other game, or is this one maybe feel a little different?
We approach all the games, not all the games same, but most of them the same with the same things we want to do.
Without giving away too many too many secrets here. I mean, what did Lex do good against you guys the first time, and what are you guys going to have to do a little bit better this time around?
They were great in the post. We got to get better in the post.
Right on. Right on. And this past weekend was the tournament draw, and as expected, that D2 tournament is going to be a meat grinder. I went out to the draw, and it was very funny because if you've never been there, each coach has given a seed, or each team has given a seed, and then the coach has a chance to place himself on the bracket, and they go in the order of the seeds. So the number 1 seed gets the first choice, et cetera. And there's 4 or 5 or 6 teams that already had 14, 15 wins. They got to the Clyde head coach, and Doug Rickert, the tournament director at Madison, said, Clyde, where would you like to place yourself? And Clyde's coach sat there probably for a minute studying the bracket, and he finally said, I'd like to place myself in a different district. And I think that's the consensus out there. I mean, it's going to be a meat grinder.
It is, and it's fun though. You go in and you want to have a competitive. And I've coached in and played in a lot of district or sectional draws and tournaments where it just wasn't competitive, and you knew certain teams you could just pencil them all the way into the district final because you just knew. But so it's fun now knowing that legitimately there are a lot of teams that have a shot. You play well, you can beat any team in that district. On the flip side, if you don't play well, you could get beat by any team in the district. And we're all trying to win, but it makes it fun, especially for the fans. It makes it really fun.
Yeah, I asked Joe Baylog, Ontario's coach, out there on Sunday. I said, well, if you had any advice to high school basketball fans, where would you tell them to go, because there's 2 different sectional sites. He said, you can't go wrong wherever you go. I mean, there's going to be really good basketball no matter what. And Angelo, I mean, you guys were, I think, a number 4 seed. 3 really good teams ahead of you, some really good teams behind you. I mean, as you guys approach, I don't even know if you guys have talked about the tournament yet, but, I mean, as you approach it, I mean, is it exciting to be in a field with so many good teams?
Yeah, it's always exciting to be in a good field with teams. Because it's going to be competitive. Right,
and it certainly will be competitive. But before that, I mean, there's still a lot to play for here in the last week. And F, as a former coach, I would imagine that this is how you want it. I mean, you want to be playing meaningful games to get ready for the postseason.
Absolutely. I've always it's a struggle when either A, you've got the conference locked up at this point in the season, and to motivate the kids to still be getting better for the tournament, or you're so far out of it that it doesn't matter. So this is a prime opportunity for the Tigers and Lexington, for that matter, and a lot of other teams to make a push to get better. And I think playing these types of meaningful games this late in the season really prepares your team. Nothing's going to prepare these teams for the tournament like this game on Friday night.
Right, and going forward here, I mean, it's Lex on Friday, then Senior High plays at Ontario next week, and closes it out with Ashland at home. All 3 of those games they could all go either way. I mean, that's you got to be playing your best, and I would imagine it's better to be playing good teams right now instead of be playing teams that you could run over.
And that's the great thing about high school basketball, and I oftentimes wish there was a way they could do it in football where every team got an opportunity to go to the playoffs, because there's nothing like it. You can, as a coach, you can schedule aggressively, and you could really challenge your team in ways that you just can't do in football, because you drop a game or 2 and you're out of the playoff hunt, and your kids are like, well, and these are high school kids, so if I'm not going to the playoffs, why am I trying to get better? But in high school basketball, that is a great dynamic. You can push your kids even with a loss. Senior High had a tough loss Saturday, but right now they still got everything to play for.
Sure.
So it's a great dynamic to have, and they along with some other teams, and Lex has still got a few huge meaningful games to play here down the stretch. So it's just a fun time of year as a fan and even as a player, because right now you're playing more games in practice, it feels like, and you'll be rolling into the tournament here before you know it.
Angelo, how is it? I mean, how are practices this week? Is it more exciting than usual, I guess? I mean, is there a little bit more of a spring in everyone's step?
Yeah, we're way more focused, way more focused.
And I would imagine that's how Marquise wants it going into what the stretch you guys are going into here.
Yeah.
Well, very good. I think that's going to do it for today. We certainly appreciate Angelo coming down, and for co-host Effie James, I'm Kurt Conrad, and this has been West 4th and Goal. Thanks for listening. West 4th and Goal is a part of the Richland Source Podcast Network and is produced and edited by Noah Jones. I'm your host, Kurt Conrad, and on behalf of co-host Effie James, thanks for listening.